Today we're going to make one of these wire wrapped lighter cases to fit the standard Bic lighter. This tutorial here has a bunch of different shapes of wire all connected together. You can see I've got a little love heart in there and some spirals. The case itself is actually quite solid and you can take it on and off your different lighters. We have another video as well for a different lighter case. This one on the left here is made with one long length of the 16 gauge wire. But the one we're making today is a bit more complex and it sort of looks different because it's got all the different shapes connected together. For this one here, we start out with one 4-inch length of the 16 gauge wire. And we just bend this part around the top of the lighter. Just push it in the middle and then bending it around evenly on each side. So you want it to sort of be able to slide up and down a little bit, but you don't want it too loose or too tight. You just sort of want it fitting snugly. Now at this point, at the back of the lighter where the wires cross over, we just want to grab the wire with our pliers there and bend both of them directly straight down so that we're going to be able to attach them together. So just bending them both down at a 90-degree angle so that they sit next to each other. And just check your size against your lighter, make sure it's the right size, not too tight or too loose. And you can adjust it now if it needs to be adjusted. Once you've got the sizing right on this first piece of wire, you can just bend each tail around in a little loop away from each other. Just with the wires connecting there in the middle, sitting next to each other. And that's going to be the first connection that you make with our 24 gauge wire to hold it nice and secure. I'll just put this piece aside now while I just measure out all the other pieces that we need for our lighter case. I'm measuring out 15 3-inch lengths of the 16 gauge black wire. So I just measure and cut all of these out. And then I just measure out my 24 gauge lengths as well. For these here I measure out 1.5-inch lengths. They don't have to be perfectly exact as long as I can go around the wires a couple of times. I have used about 35 of these for this wrap here, but it will depend on how many connections you put on as to how many you will need. Now with all our little lengths of the 16 gauge wire, the black wire there, I just start by making them into all their sort of abstract and random shapes. Some of them are spirals, we've got different curly parts, I've got a little love heart in there, all different shapes that you want. Some parts of the wrap you'll need a little skinny part or a bigger end on one or the other, and so it's good to have a few different shapes that you can put into the size hole that you've got. You can always make up different ones as you go as well and bend them into place. Once you've made up all your shapes, you can get back to your wire wrap. We need to start by just making that connection on the top there. Just popping it on and double checking that it is the right size and it's going to fit on there comfortably. We're going to wrap our first little connection into that little join there. Just grabbing your 24 gauge wire length and wrapping it around that little piece there. I like to wrap it around at least 3 times, and you try and have the ends of the wires end up on the inside of the wrap. You want these connections to be nice and tight as well, so just trying to make sure that you're pulling them nice and tight and there's no sort of slack in that wire there. Trying to have your connections be nice and tidy if you can. wrapping the wire around next to the other wraps as well. Then when you've popped your little connection on, you can just cut that little end tail piece off and crimp it down nice and tight. We're going to start to form our wires around the lighter now. So we're just going to move around this top layer, grabbing the next piece of wire that you want on there, placing the piece of wire on there and sort of forming it onto the lighter. Just bending it, especially around the harsher corners of the lighter. You need to kind of bend it around, make sure it's fitting nicely. And you can see the spots that need connections there. I find it easier to wrap the connections on if I take it off the lighter. Just gives me better access. We just grab another piece of our 24 gauge wire and wrap it around that next little connection there where the wires touch together. Wrapping this piece of wire around at least 3 times, or the same amount of times as you did on the other wrap, so you can keep it looking uniform. Keeping it nice and tight as well, and trying to finish those tails off on the inside of your wrap. I'm going to pop a second connection onto this piece as well, just to hold this piece of wire in place. So I just go ahead and wrap that the same way. As you work around your case, you will see the parts that need connections of the wires that are sitting next to each other. Not every single part that's touching needs a connection, but you will find that the more you put on there, the more solid your little case will be. I also glue them at the end as well. I just find that that gives them a little bit more strength as well. You'll also start to see the parts of the wire wrap that need a certain shaped piece. You want to just keep checking your wire wrap onto your lighter quite often, just to make sure that you're forming it around in the perfect shape. Onto the next piece of wire, and obviously you want to try and find one that either fits in the hole or that is going to look good in that spot as well, and then bending it around the side of the lighter as well. Same thing again with this next connection, is just working your 24 gauge wire around to form a nice strong connection. You can see there where the connections are for this one, so just removing it and popping your connections on. I wouldn't worry too much either if, as you're working, some of the connections do become loose. You can just swap them over at the end, make sure they're nice and tight. So as you work around, you're just securing those pieces of wire, wrapping them around nice and tight. Using your Bic lighter like a little mould and forming the wire around and just wrapping it securely into place. You do have to have a bit of patience for this wrap here. It took me about an hour or just over to wrap this, but I'm going to speed it up a little bit for you guys so you can just press pause if you're catching up. Working around the top layer to start with, and then just slowly working your way down from the top to the bottom. As you work around the harsher edges of the lighter as well, you just need to bend your wires into place around those edges, around the corners, and then it will be easier to put your little connections on, and your little case is actually going to fit perfectly onto your lighter as well. You can also adjust your wire pieces as you go to fit the size hole that you've got there as well. So if you've got quite a small skinny hole, you just bend your wire to fit inside a hole that size. There's certainly no set design for this one here. We just sort of make it work as we go. You could even get creative and sort of make a word or letters or, you know, any sort of design shape on there as well and incorporate them into your wire wrap. I'm just going to pop this upside down heart in this smaller hole here with a connection on each side. That sort of finishes off the top layer of the wrap, and we're just going to gently head down the lighter doing the same thing until we've reached the bottom. As we come down towards the bottom of the lighter, we just basically do the exact same thing, except that you bend the pieces of wire around the base of the lighter to form the case around the bottom as well. Just bending each piece to suit the hole that you've got, and if it goes around the corner, you just bend it into place. And then of course just put your little connections on to secure it into place. It can be a little bit tricky at the bottom part because you can't get your pliers inside as easily, but you still can just bend them around from the top, bending the wires under and sort of grabbing them with your pliers. Now is a good time as well just to check over all of your other connections and make sure that they're nice and secure. If there's any that are getting loose, you can tighten them up or replace them if you need to. Now is your chance to add any more connections as well if there are any spots that are feeling weaker or that need one. And also just make sure that your end pieces or tails are tucked inside the wrap so that all your connections look nice and tidy. Once you've checked over all your connections and you're happy with them all and the way that your wire case is sitting, we can secure them up by putting some glue onto all the connections. So I've got the Hypo Cement Jewellery Glue here. I just am going to put a little dab onto each connection there to sort of hold it in place nice and secure. It is quite a sturdy sort of a case and can handle being taken on and off lighters, swapped onto a different one when your lighter runs out.